everyone. You're watching the AZEEZA show. My name is Farheen Khan, and this week we're going to actually talk about a topic that I think is important to talk about but often doesn't get spoken of, and that's on racism in the workplace. And with me is our guest, Karen Donaldson. Karen, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So Karen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, I am first and foremost a mother of three,
Okay.
a very proud mother of three, but on the professional side, I'm a communication and body language coach and speaker.
Right.
And I'm in the business of helping entrepreneurs and just individuals increase their impact, increase their confidence when they
Sure.
speak, as well as I'm a best-selling author, and I just show people how to really speak up, own their confidence and own their worth, no matter if it's in the workplace
Right.
or in life.
Amazing. Well, and you recently wrote a book that you published in 2018.
Yes, I have.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Absolutely. The name of the book, it was just published this past October 2018, and
Sure.
It was a best-selling book. So that's,
Amazing.
a great accomplishment for me.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's called Speak Like You Breathe.
For sure. Yep.
Straight talk to get noticed, be heard, and say what you mean. And it's essentially covering conversations around how do we own our voice in all settings, and why are we worthy enough to share what we have to say, and how do we do it. So we
Right.
talk about body language, verbal communication, nonverbal, and it really it's a bit of a toolkit for anyone in the workplace, leadership position, anyone who's just ready to step up and say what they mean.
Excellent. And I was just had a chance to look at your book briefly, and one of the things that sort of stood out to me was this idea of like being assertive but not being seen as being aggressive, particularly for women, right? That was something that kind of came up. It's like, if I'm saying too much, it's like I'm suddenly, this, as you say in the book, this bitch, because I'm trying to, be difficult, versus if I'm a man and I'm being aggressive, then that's just completely understood, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So you've worked with a lot of executives. Can you give us some examples of like what you've seen over time?
No, indeed, and I'll share a story in 1 minute as well.
Sure.
What you find is at the senior management level, and I do a lot of coaching with senior managers when it comes to effective communication with teams, you primarily see that those who are making the decisions don't reflect the workplace or the employee base.
Correct.
And see, that's an unfortunate thing, because the lens in which they see things through, the lens in which they communicate, is completely different or completely neglected. So when I go in and coach my clients, whether it be a senior manager or whether it be a team leader, it's a conversation that needs to be had around, outside of yourself, you have to ensure that you're accommodating other people and what it means to accommodate other people.
Absolutely. And I think that, like we were going to talk about like racism in the workplace, but I think it goes beyond that, as you said, right? In life. I mean, I remember, an example of like when I was attending a training workshop, and I had run for political office in 2015. So I was standing in like, sitting in this training, and somebody's talking about how like door knocking is essential and that you should go into condo buildings and start knocking on doors. But if, we have a letter just sort of outlining the fact that we have permission to go in, but if somebody was to stop us, like a security guard, then the response was, okay, well, just, tell them it's okay. If you're uncomfortable, call the police, it's fine. And, coming from somebody who's not racialized, I was like, okay, like that's great. But then I put my hand up and I was like, can I just remind you that like I could never do that, right? Because the repercussions of that would be actually very problematic. I probably would get into trouble,
Correct.
as opposed to somebody else. So it's stuff like that,
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. So I mean, sorry, you were going to give us an example of stories.
No, absolutely. When we were talking about working with senior leaders and things like that, quite often I go in and I do one-on-one communication coaching. And there was this one opportunity that I received, and I was going in to coach a CEO.
Right.
And when I work with C-level suite or senior managers, it's usually based on referral. Right. And my name's Karen Donaldson, and it's neither here or there. You can't really tell, is Karen a black lady? Is Karen a white lady? Is she racialized? You just don't know.
Sure.
So I went into the office, and the desks were, similar to this height there. And I said, hi, my name's Karen Donaldson, and I'm here to meet with Mr. So-and-so. So the receptionist, a Caucasian lady, looked at her book, and she looked back up at me, and she looked back down, and she said, you're Karen Donaldson? I said, yes, I'm here to meet with Mr. So-and-so. So she looked back at her book, and she asked me, is Karen Donaldson parking the car? Is Karen out of the car? Will someone be bringing her in? And I said, no, I'm Karen Donaldson. And she looked down in the book again, because she knew I was coming in to work with her CEO. but apparently I didn't look, or I didn't deem worthy enough to be the public speaking coach to a CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Wow.
Nonetheless, here's what happened, Farheen. I went to sit down, she asked me to have a seat, I sat down, and she sat down at her desk, she picked up the phone and she called her boss, and here's what she said. Mr. So-and-so, we have this black lady here who says she's Karen Donaldson.
Wow.
And in that moment, you know when you pause because you truly can't believe this is happening. It's, you know, I believe that time, 2016, 2017, and it happens quite often. But nonetheless, I said in that moment I could have corrected her, but sometimes we have to stand strong in knowing what we're there for, and having the right conversation with the appropriate person who can affect bigger change in the organization.
Sure.
So I left her, and when I went in to work with my new client, I shared what she had said. Mm-hmm. And I shared how I felt and how he, you know, made suggestions on how he needed to manage it.
Right. And
those are conversations that we have to have with individuals who may not see it. When you talk about white privilege, right. You know, even when, if you go back to my book, Speak Like You Breathe, yeah. We have conversations. I have a chapter called Man Talk and Lady Talk.
Yes, I saw that.
And the small nuances and the big differences around how we communicate as individuals.
For sure. No, that's great. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's just, it's amazing how sometimes it can be so subtle and sometimes it can be so sort of blatant and in your face, right? Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, I think recently I had you know, an experience where I was part of a group discussion, and you know, we were talking, and I you know, I happened to be the only person of color that kept bringing up this notion of like, let's talk about diversity, let's make sure we're engaging the right communities, let's not just, you know, look at people of color as quote service users, but let's also consider that they have the capacity to give, because I'm from the not-for-profit sector. And you know, it was amazing to see how difficult that conversation was to have, and how uncomfortable people, you know, that are not racialized or of color were feeling about that discussion. So what do you say to that?
I say, you know, it's great that you kept bringing it up, and this is where, when I work with individuals, or in that case there, I always say that you need to speak up and be heard. One, you're speaking for the voiceless, so there are those who can't speak up or don't know how to speak up. Right. And if no one speaks up, nothing changes. Right. You have those in power, those decision makers who some don't believe it exists. Right. But if you're living it, it's somewhat of your duty to share it. Right? And when we start to share it, and once we start to walk together, right. That's when we can affect change. Yeah. But you know, when I have conversations with my clients and we talk about confidence and just being assertive, it doesn't equal aggression. And you know, as you alluded to before, right. Quite often when women speak up, right. There's an issue, you're aggressive all of a sudden. Add a woman of color on top of that, oh, you're totally aggressive, calm down. You know what I mean? And here's what I tell people, the issue is not with you. It's the issue of that accuser calling you the B word, calling you the bitch, or calling you aggressive. And know that you'll only live in that language if you choose to, but you need to stand in your worth, say what you need to say so you can start to affect change.
For sure. And that, I mean, that really takes a lot of courage, right? To actually stand up and speak up like that. I mean, I know that it's never easy. And sometimes it's hard. Like, I think in the moment, I mean, if I can speak for myself, in the moment, sometimes it's like, you know, you were saying, like, it just took a moment to really think about, like, would that really happen? Did that just, you know, and did that person just say that? Like, I remember once coming out of an interview, because I was looking to get onto a board of directors for a not-for-profit that I was really passionate about. Right. And so I come into, you know, this Bay Street building after hours to meet with this individual who's like the chair or whatever. And, you know, he was like a big Bay Street lawyer or whatever. It was like a health foundation thing, right? Anyway, so here I am standing, and we had the discussion. He's opening the door because it was after hours, so he's unlocking the door. And there's a lady standing in the lobby who was waiting to go down in the elevator. So as, you know, this man is opening the door, letting me out, and then basically locking it behind him to go back in, she says to me as I come out, she's like, you know, it feels like he just released you out of a jail.
She made that comment, huh?
Yeah. And I just looked at her like, sorry? Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't even understand. Like, how can you, you know, say that? And so that's the kind of thing, right? But in that moment, I was like, I had no idea how to respond to her, because I was just like, I'm just gonna be quiet and just stand here because I really have no words to articulate how upset or, you know, unhappy I am with this experience. You know, and so I appreciate the fact that you've written this book and that you're able to coach people through really uncomfortable conversations.
They are. And, you know, that's a key thing. They are uncomfortable conversations. And I always tell people it can take it on a situational basis. So in that example, you know, you're completely caught off guard.
Right.
And you're not too sure if this person belongs to, you know, that individual's organization or not.
Right,
but
exactly.
in those moments, you know that what you believe about yourself to be true, and some things you have to walk away from. But when it comes to organizations, those are the places where we need to speak up.
Right.
I do a lot of work with the educational sector, and I was recently working with the York Region District School Board.
Right.
And they have recently put in an entire anti-harassment and anti-racism department just this past fall.
Excellent.
So you're now seeing organizations taking a step forward to say, you know what, we have a belief that it still exists,
Right.
whether it's apparent or, as we're talking about, you know, undercover or, you know, slightly overt. It's still occurring and people are still experiencing it. And we're not trying to create community cultures or organizational cultures where this exists. So when I go in, it's a conversation that needs to be had, Farheen, and it really is. And as you share it, it can be a tough one.
For sure.
It can
Well,
really
we're
be a
going to have
tough
to take a quick break and then we'll be back. Okay, we'll be back right after this. Hi everyone, welcome back. You're watching the AZEEZA show and we're having a great discussion about racism in the workplace. So Karen, before the break you were just talking about how some organizations are starting to, you know, take notice and actually take measures or put measures into place, right, to start to challenge some of this racism. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
No, indeed. It's kind of I'm seeing that it's a 60-40 split where 40% of organizations are seeing that this is something important that needs to be dealt with. But a lot of the time what you find in workplaces or when I speak with clients or just employees or people in general, they're experiencing it, and those, I don't want to call them the aggressors, but those who are the deliverers of the racist acts or words, it's not always loud,
Right.
but it's offensive,
Yes.
right? And the question people have is, Karen, what do I do?
Right.
Because sometimes the person who's doing it may be aware of it, they may not be, but it doesn't make it right.
No, exactly. Absolutely. And the thing is, like, it's like, you know, sometimes it's like they're not trying to be difficult or hurtful, but it's more ignorance. Right. Other times people are so sort of out of, you know, at least my experience has been, they're so, you know, disconnected that it's like, oh, I didn't even think so. And then I was like, well, you know, maybe we should do some like anti-oppression training. Oh, I've done lots of that, right? Like that's the response. So how do you deal with that? You know?
No, so here's the thing. So if you're experiencing it, it's actually your job to call people on it. Right. So whether they realize they're doing it or not, it's not okay. And we have to inform them that it's not okay. Right. Because there's one piece that they know that they're doing wrong, and the other piece of people don't know what they don't know. Right. So in those cases, if it's overt and loud, if you're comfortable enough, you're gonna ask someone to stop or call them on or say, you know what, could I speak to you? But if it's something where you think it's their norm or they may not see it as offensive, right, you should still take them aside and have a conversation with a person, whether it is your boss. Because you need to let people know if it is okay or if it's not okay. Right. Otherwise, we're teaching people how to treat us. Exactly. And if it's for someone who continues after you've asked them to stop, because let's be honest, if we don't know something, we can't change it. For sure. So when we acknowledge it, we have to acknowledge it and show someone else that it's offensive. Right. And once we don't see any change, that's where you want to actually move on to someone higher above. Right? There is a hierarchy in the workplaces, you know, in organizations. So you want to take it from that individual person and, you know, give people the benefit of the doubt. Right. Maybe they just didn't get it, or it may have been okay at home, but you have to let them know that's not okay here. Right. And give them an opportunity to change. However, when they don't, we have anti-oppression laws in organizations, we have human rights code, and no matter the color of your skin, your age, your sexual orientation, we're talking about equitable practices and equity in the workplace. Right. So it's for you to now have enough confidence to speak up. But no, the first step, number one, is having that conversation with a direct individual, then moving to whoever your boss is or whoever that decision maker is. Right.
And that again requires courage, right?
It does.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what would be some strategies that you would use if I was the person who actually needed to you know, have that conversation with somebody.
So if you were the person who was offended, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The first strategy is, I always tell people to write down how you feel.
Okay.
Because not everyone is able, and you know, there's a time for me as well. You know what you want to say in your head,
Yeah.
but I don't work.
Yes.
And I can't say that to you.
Right.
And when we're in a moment of anger or just feeling, you know, infringed upon, you want to take a moment and calm yourself down before you have the conversation.
Sure.
Because you want to be professional. You want to be heard. And when two people are yelling, no one's heard. So one of the approaches or strategy is to really write down what happened.
Okay.
Because if you have to move it somewhere else, you want to have some type of record outside of memory in the heat of the moment. So take a moment, and the whole purpose of you writing it down is to really earmark what happened and what was said and what the exchange entailed.
Right.
And if you need the paper trail. And then after that, you want to have a look at exactly what you want to say to the person.
Right.
And when you're talking about what you want to say, you want to clearly say what offended you. Be specific.
Right.
And that you're asking them not to do it again.
Right.
And the other thing that sometimes we have to say on top of it, so you're going to identify what offended you.
Right.
Ask them directly not to do it again, or let them know it's not okay. And also sometimes we have to ask, let them know how we want to be treated.
Right.
So if you should ever think you can call me like that, just please call me by my first name, Karen. You know what I mean?
Right.
Show people how to treat you once again. So write it down, speak to the person, and you want to touch on those 3 points.
Right.
Right.
Okay. That's great. And I guess, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like it's a teachable moment, right?
It is.
It's not meant to be something where you're, necessarily slapping somebody on the wrist and saying, oh, you did this badly. It's more of just being able to, right? Like not being defensive about it, but
Definitely.
still being able to articulate your concerns and being able to share and hopefully have some dialogue.
Right.
So the other person,
Right.
really gets
No,
it,
for
right?
sure. No, for sure. Because what some people don't realize is that actions have impact.
Right. Right.
And we have to tell people when it impacts us.
Right.
Otherwise, they think it's okay. Then you're building a culture, a false culture.
Yes.
One of the conversations I have with people, no matter if it's an organization or more so when I work with teams of varying levels in the same room, is that we spend more awake hours in the workplace, right? With our commute, the time that you're actually doing your work. And when you're at home, you're primarily sleeping. You're eating, you're sleeping, you're getting back up to go again.
Right.
So you want to create a community culture
Yes.
in the same manner in the community that you live. So when I go in and work with teams, we have this conversation. We talk about the elephant in the room. And we talk about those teachable moments, and I show people how they can create their own teachable moments within their teams.
Right.
Right?
That's great. So, I mean, you've obviously said, actions have impact. So why did you choose to, use your voice? Why did you choose to get into this type of work?
No, great question. Thank you for asking. I was a young high school mom, and my last year of high school is when I got pregnant with my daughter. And up until the point of the whole school finding out that I was pregnant, I was head of the debate team. I was an AB student, a lot of sports. Teachers loved me. When I came back, I found out I was pregnant. I lost all of my friends and the faith of all the teachers. And Farheen, I was missing a lot of school.
Right.
And my self-esteem went so low, and I felt voiceless. And there's one day I was walking home, and I looked in the bus shelter. And I said to myself, Karen, words and actions of others do not define you unless you allow it to. Right. And I went back to school with a totally different frame of mind. And I said to myself, I'm only pregnant. I'm not diseased, I'm not contagious, and I'm the same person. If you choose to perceive me as different, that is a choice you have, but know that I know who I am. Right. And from that point, for me, it was very important to ensure that I taught myself and I taught those around me, and I shared with those around me that it was okay to stand true to who you are, no matter your experience and no matter your environment. Right. Because no matter if you have 5 cars in your driveway and I take the public transit, it's meaningless unless we add meaning to it. Yes. So we need to focus on what we mean and what we want and why we want it, and stand true in that. So for me, that's where that whole communications came from, and just taking people who are voiceless and always showing people you always have a voice. It has nothing to do with the money in your bank account. And from there, it just went into writing books, working with teams, helping people take their expertise. So people like you get on stage and just share your message with the world and impact the world with what you have to say. So that's where it all began.
Amazing. Wow. Well, thank you for your strength and your courage and your resilience. I mean, that's incredible.
Thank you so much.
And why did you choose to write a book? What's the thinking around that?
Around the book, I knew that I couldn't reach everyone. So I'm one of those big thinkers, and yes, I do want to change the world, and I will, one step at a time. And outside of speaking on stages all the time, I go out and do keynotes quite often. I needed another platform for those who didn't have the opportunity to take part in my one-on-one or group coaching programs. And for me, it was a book. And one of the ways that I write my books is I want it to be an easy read. Right? I don't want it to seem like more work. And now how we live, everything's so busy and so hectic. So for me, it was creating a small toolkit, a little pocket guide that someone can either download or get a copy, but quickly read it and use it. You know, I didn't want it to be that book that sat down, you kept meaning to read it, and you meant to get to it, but you saw that it's 500 pages. It's very practical, applicable, and that was the reason. I just want to reach more people. So that's how Speak Like You Breathe was born.
Very cool. Well, I mean, and what kind of a response have you had since you've published the book?
Oh, it's been phenomenal. It's been phenomenal. As I shared earlier, I was alluding to earlier, it made the bestseller list, and I was on there for over a week. And I was bestseller for a number of different categories as well. But I always leave it behind with my clients, and I'm always getting, you know, emails and texts and messages how they're able to take it to their teams. We're just talking about the workplace, and we're talking about, you know, having more diversity at the decision-making tables as well, which is super important. That's how we start to shift the paradigm around how often people experience all the isms. Right? And people being able to use that with their female audience and their male audience and their, you know, generation X and Y, their different audiences. So I've been hearing it's a great toolkit, and it's on sale. It's on Amazon right now, and as well as on my website, Speak Confident.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, I know just in my own way, I'm an author and I've written a book about my personal life, but it's just like, it's wonderful to hear when people actually read it and they're like, wow, like, you know, it felt like you were reading, you know, you were voicing my own life experience or whatever. It's just such a, you know, amazing feeling. So I'm, you know, really happy that you chose to do that and to use your voice in the way that you are. And yeah, like you said, it's just, you know, it's just about changing the world a little bit at a time, right?
It is.
Wonderful. So do you have any last minute thoughts? We're just about to wrap.
Oh, some last minute thoughts.
Sure.
It's just a reminder for everyone that we are all born enough. You know, and really and truly, I really encourage everyone to take these words and live it. Words of others don't define you. You define you. And they only define you if you allow it to. So know that you're worthy to say anything you need to. Know that you're worthy to stand up for your rights. And if I can be of any support to anyone, I'm always here. And, you know, I know you'll leave my website behind. And people, feel free to reach out. We only grow when we grow collectively.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, and wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be on your show.
No worries.
Thanks,
take care. All right, everyone. So until next week, take care, and we'll see you then.